Welcome everyone to the official relaunch of Mystic Mind's Analysis Tavern. What follows is a recreation of the panel I hosted at 2025's UK Ponycon, which I wasn't able to record due to technical difficulties. This is Mystic Mind's guide to MLP analysis and reviews. Before we begin, allow me to introduce myself a bit. My name is Pip, aka Mystic Mind. I go by they them pronouns and have been in the fandom since the beginning of Season 2 in 2011. I joined the MLP analysis community on YouTube around 2014, but ended up losing interest in the video making process around 2017. In recent times, I have been on a nearly year-long quest to review every single episode of Friendship is Magic, with reviews shared between fanfiction blogs, Blue Sky threads, and the UK Ponycon community Discord. I am currently toward the end of Season 8 and will soon be turning these text reviews into podcast format, in addition to my existing fanfiction writing and character drawing. This podcast episode will mostly be focusing on Generation 4 of MLP for example purposes, both because of its familiarity and how this show got me invested in the topic of media literacy. The goal here is not to dictate the quality of G4 over others, or indeed dictate your enjoyment of any media in general. Rather, this panel is about discussion. Why you enjoy something matters far more than the fact that you enjoyed it. So this panel is about providing a shared language to express what we enjoy about Friendship is Magic and MLP in general. As an additional caveat, you don't need to go super in-depth in breaking down tropes, themes and patterns to justify your enjoyment. It's perfectly fine to say, I enjoy this because it makes me feel good. Taking episodes apart is how I express my love for the media because I am a massive nerd, of which I hope to clearly convey over the course of this panel. Part 1. What is MLP analysis? The term review and analysis can often be used interchangeably, but I'd say one is an expansion of the other. Criticism is all about explaining what works for any given piece of media, what doesn't, and how it could be improved, while analysis is more about how ideas are conveyed through themes, dialogue, and subtext. In other words, the core question analysis seeks to ask is, what is the episode trying to express and how did they go about it? What I do, and what most pony analysts did back in G4's heyday, is a mixture of both. A few big names you may recognise in what was the analysis community could be Dr. Wolf, the mysterious Mr. Enter, and Josh Scorcher, most of who have moved on from exclusively MLP-focused content. I love the idea that it is often necessary to be critical of things we love. Through this perspective, I have found that understanding what makes good art allows the best moments to shine even further, while also allowing for a proportional approach to critiques over a less than stellar episode. Quality will always be a sliding scale, and I find that more often than not, I can understand and respect what the writers were trying to say, even if the way they went about it is flawed. When we talk about reviews of any kind, it's important to recognise the difference between objective facts and subjective opinion. No one review is going to be 100% objective, and we all carry our own implicit biases and value judgments that we apply to entertainment. What themes and ideas are personal to you will vary wildly, so the best we can do is compare these subjective emotions with objective facts to help understand how and why we reach our conclusion. An objective review will be little more than a plot recap, stating independently variable facts such as Twilight is coloured purple, Spike is a dragon, Rainbow Dash is a Pegasus pony, and so on and so forth. We will touch on this more later. Different reviews have different criteria for what makes an episode good or bad, sometimes giving ratings to convey this. For myself, I rank each given episode into tiers, each with their own simple criteria. From bottom to top, they go as follows. E tier. Negatives greatly outweigh the positives and may include rancid morals. D tier. Negatives generally outweigh the positives. C tier. Neither predominantly negative or positive. B tier. Positives generally outweigh the negatives. A tier. A tier. Positives greatly outweigh the negatives. S tier. Negatives have almost no impact on the positives whatsoever and may include positive morals too important to ignore. Part 2. Subtext. One particularly pervasive, thought-terminating cliché regarding media literacy is "the curtains were blue." The meme refers to an English teacher talking about why the author wrote about blue curtains. The English teacher says it represents the author's emotions, but the students just say the blue curtains only represent the fact that the curtains were blue. This is a rejection of subtext, suggesting that there is no greater reason for creative choices other than what's explicitly presented on screen. Subtext is about themes shown through actions and implications rather than stated outright. This is most frequently manifested through the literary concept of coding. While ponies of Equestria do have basic anatomy of a small horse, they are also anthropomorphized to a small degree. This means that we apply human traits to these characters to make them more relatable to the people watching them. Why do they have such big eyes? Why do they speak English? Why do they bake cakes and have toed boots despite technically lacking toes, as we have them? This is all to allow the audience to relate to them as people, recognizing patterns we experience in our everyday lives. Of course, part of the charm is seeing workarounds for everyday situations, like writing with a mouse or using magic. One of my favourite tropes regarding subtext is deconstruction, taking writing conventions and applying more realistic outcomes to them, showing the consequences thereof. Lesson 0 demonstrates this best, showing Twilight's tendency to overthink situations, sharing traits commonly found in autistic people, such as a reliance on routines and catastrophizing when routines are disrupted. She is so desperate to follow her routine that she creates her own friendship problems for her to solve. This is also a meta-commentary on the trope of the Aesop lesson itself. Since the 1980s, many kids' cartoons have been expected to provide moral lessons at the end, justifying their existences through educational messages. Friendship is Magic manifested this through letters to Celestia and later the Friendship Journal, giving an in-universe justification without breaking the fourth wall, as that is Pinkie Pie's job. Lesson 0 shows how willing the writers were to poke fun at their own writing formulas, while also giving them less pressure to produce a lesson for each and every story. Part 3. Watsonian and Doyleist Analysis. The next step of understanding subtext is recognizing the difference between Watsonian and Doyleist analysis. To explain the difference, Watsonian analysis is the in-universe justification for why something happens, just like how Dr. Watson in a Sherlock Holmes novel may explain the criminal's motivation for a crime. Take Detective Rarity as an example. In-universe, Wind Rider framed Rainbow Dash because he didn't want her to beat his endurance flight record. Doylean analysis, however, is named after the author of the Sherlock Holmes books, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the out-of-universe or creator reason for the events of the plot to happen. In this case, the Doyleist reason for Wind Rider's actions is because the entire episode is an affectionate parody of film noir detective stories, and the crime needed to be something relatively low stakes for children to enjoy, while also making it personal to Rainbow Dash. Detective Rarity is an episode that is dripping with subtext, using our expectation biases against us to provide both dramatic and comedic conflict. Throughout the episode, we are shown that Rarity is extremely passionate about all things fashion, but also a particular detective novel. Everything she looks at and talks about appears to be extremely frivolous, caring more about the material of the curtains or the outfit of some pony who bought a cake. Yet at the climax of this episode, Rarity reveals the purpose behind everything she did, pointing out how everything she looked at is evidence as to the true culprit. I love this because it not only reframes everything we've seen up to that point, it presents a clear message through subtext. Appearances can be deceiving. You may not understand everything that's going on in your life, but sometimes trusting your friends to know what they're doing may surprise you. Watsonian and Doyleist analysis can also be applied to another key factor in storytelling and criticism: plot contrivances. As the mysterious Mr. Enter once said, if there were no contrivances to the plot, there would be no plot. A contrivance is just a specific set of events that bring the characters together to generate conflict. In Flight to the Finished, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon join up just as the CMC finish their routine is a contrivance, but one that's believable in universe. However, it is possible to do contrivances badly, and that's when you ignore the Watsonian reason for a plot point to happen. Let's use one of, in my opinion, the worst episodes of Friendship is Magic, Princess Spike, as a case study. Spike is trying to keep an area of Canterlot around Twilight's bedroom quiet so she can sleep, and there are multiple sources of noise that happen at that exact moment. Indeed, pipework and tree cutting, by themselves, are not unusual events for this universe, but the dragon sneeze trees are the exception. What purpose in universe does having dragon sneeze trees serve? Why is the specific plant, which is only remarkable by its ability to make a dragon sneeze, here in Canterlot at this specific time and place, other than to make Spike's life difficult? It's never explained why they are there. It's just a part of a larger problem of the episode bending over backward to generate conflict for Spike. Plus, they only affect him when the plot demands it, as shown when he is talking to Princess Cadence and is completely unaffected. When we talk about a story being believable, we don't mean it has to be 100% grounded in reality. You can have magic and fantastical creatures that do not conform to our reality, but they need to make sense in the context of the fictional universe itself. World building is something Friendship is Magic is excellent at, since it develops the culture around each of the fictional races, along with the custom and distinct ideals to help us relate to them. This is why I think the Young Six are the best parts of Season 8 and 9, because they show how Equestria's allied races are learning about friendship from pony culture. Part 4. Political art? Possibly the most controversial topic of media literacy is the claim that all art is political. Now, when I say this, I am not talking about electoral politics, such as whether Twilight Sparkle or Mayor would make better mayors for Ponyville. Rather, I'm talking about how cultural biases inevitably influence how we tell our stories, based on what we perceive as normality. Sometimes it's a deliberate choice, like how pony cities such as Manhattan and Philadelphia are name puns on American cities, owing to the production crew being largely American. However, it's important to recognise how stories can contain unintended implications, and there is no better example of this than the Season 1 episode Feeling Pinky Keen. In this episode, Twilight expresses extreme skepticism as to the reality of Pinkie Pie's pinky sense, insisting that real magic is written about in books and isn't related to random predictions. In the end, Twilight accepts that even if she can't explain something, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. At the time of this episode's airing, there was a lot of debate in the fandom as to whether this was a metaphor for religious faith, accepting a supernatural occurrence regardless of whether you can explain it or not. To some reviewers like Josh Scorcher, This isn't a problem, since he has his biases with his own religious beliefs. I want to stress that I am not making comments on whether this is a good or bad thing. Rather, I think recognizing our own personal biases could help us to understand why we see specific parallels to the culture we live in. This begs the question about the episode's moral. Is it unreasonable to be a skeptic? Well, to consider that point, we must consider what skepticism and blind faith are to begin with. If I said to you that I have faith that my father will return from the shops with a carton of milk, this is a colloquial way of saying that I trust an event will happen based on the likely outcome. Is it possible that a plane will crash and destroy the milk before my dad has a chance to buy it? Of course. But this isn't very likely to happen. Blind faith is about trusting that something supernatural, like magic, is real without the ability to verify it with independent evidence. Likewise, arbitrary skepticism is the exact opposite, flat out denying that something can be true regardless of evidence. Honest skepticism is about asking, how do we know something is true? In universe, Earth ponies do not typically have an active form of magic like unicorns do. Thus, for Pinkie Pie, an Earth pony, to predict random events based on unrelated body twitches sounds nonsensical. The difference here, however, is that honest skeptics will freely admit to being wrong if sufficient evidence is shown. In this case, Twilight is so dead set on debunking the Pinkie sense, she ignores all warning signs Pinkie displays and gets comically hurt as a result. Here we see three prior storytelling principles at play. A narrative contrivance is Derpy being in the exact spot to accidentally drop furniture on Twilight's head. The Watsonian reason for this is that Twilight ignored Pinkie Pie's warnings, and the Doylist reason is that it's written for slapstick comedy. Even if Twilight does not have the method of directly explaining a phenomenon, that doesn't mean it's not real. Even if we don't understand how gravity works, we can still say that it objectively does, since we aren't randomly floating off into space. In this way, we can look at the episode's moral lesson from a different perspective. It's okay to say I don't know. Admitting you can't explain something is just fine, and it doesn't make you any less reasonable as a person. Plus, at the end of the day, the Pinkie sense is reliable, repeatable, and testable given the right condition. Part 5. Darker Themes. While it isn't brought up often, Friendship is Magic has not shied away from darker themes and concepts through various episodes. While it is, first and foremost, a comedic cartoon, the writers have used this humour to balance the weight of heavy topics in a way that makes them accessible for children. Children's shows have always had a difficult relationship with the concept of death, while many in the 80s and 90s facing tight censorship that meant you couldn't even say the word die, replacing it with words destroy or banish to the Shadow Realm, as Yu-Gi-Oh fans will no doubt be well acquainted with. I don't know if Friendship is Magic ever faced explicit censorship for this specific issue, but it does manage to tackle the topic of losing a pet through the use of allegory. It's a fact of reptilian biology that turtles must hibernate in winter. They are cold-blooded, which means they don't generate their own internal body heat like we mammals do. But Rainbow Dash can't conceive of going an entire season without her beloved pet. So we get an ever-escalating series of schemes to prevent winter, and thus give Tank no reason to hibernate. Even if the details are different, with Tank going into a temporary sleep instead of a permanent death, the emotions are the same. I know from personal experience how hard it is to lose a pet, having lost one of my pet Dagoos, Gadget, earlier this summer. Dash's emotional breakdown shows clear parallels to depression, and as harsh as Fluttershy was in laying down the cold truth of the matter, pun not intended, she helps Dash come to terms with her loss through the release of emotion. Rainbow Dash has always been a more masculine coded character, so she is reluctant to be openly emotional. While emotional resilience can be useful, it can also stifle us, making us feel even worse. Once kids have a framework for recognizing parallel emotions through subtext, they can be better prepared for harsh topics later in life. Part 5. The purpose of criticism. To wrap things up, the most important part of any criticism is the purpose of criticism itself. How much stock should you put in someone else's opinion, and how does it inform your own? If there is any episode of the show that exemplifies how not to approach criticism, it would be Honest Apple. In this episode, the plot is constantly tripping over itself as to whether or not Applejack is in the wrong for giving her critiques to each of the contestants. She was specifically asked to be a judge by Rarity, and stated outright that she was to critique the dresses from a standpoint of practicality. This immediately sets her up for failure, since none of the dresses were made to be practical. They were made to be artsy, a method of self-expression rather than personal protection equipment, as you may need on a farm. These dressmakers felt disheartened, revolted, and defeated by Applejack's harsh criticism because they felt that she was trying to change art to her liking, rather than judging the art on its own merits. A quote often attributed to Albert Einstein is, "If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will go through its entire life thinking it's stupid." If we cannot understand the purpose of art to begin with, then we can't hope to give a fair critique and explain how we think it could be improved. At the end of the day, MLP is, as I stated at the beginning, a franchise aimed at children. We can't go in expecting grimdark stories or overcomplicated Inception-level stories, but we can expect them to be consistent and approach its stories in a way that treats its audience with maturity. While the intended audience can affect the content of any given episode, it does not necessarily limit the creativity. One of my favourite episodes from Season 1 is the Dog and Pony Show, because it flips the damsel in distress trope on its head. Rarity is dainty and feminine, yes, but this does not make her helpless. Rather, it's her strength, because she uses it to annoy her captives into submission, so that they will have to let her go for the sake of their own sanity. This beautifully conveys how femininity is not a weakness. Whether or not someone is masculine or physically strong matters less than how you use it. At the end of the day, our criticism needs to be constructive. When we express our love for art through criticism, we come to understand what we look for in art, allowing us to seek more art based on the shared values we love. No art will ever be perfect, but if MLP has taught me anything, it's that sometimes the best form of storytelling are universal, shining in a way that both children and adults can understand for lifetimes to come. Thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or otherwise respective criticism, I welcome your responses in the comments below. Like and share this video to increase its traction with the algorithm, make it go better, and I shall see you all next time.